Another thing that who does this really make sense for foreign trade zones? We get that a lot. People that are importing quite a bit. Who's the big benefactor of doing a foreign trade zone, and who on the call today, if they're out there, should really be looking at this?
So I think anybody that spends a lot of money in customs duties, this is something that you could definitely look at for a couple of reasons. One is just a potential duty deferment. So you might import 2 months worth of inventory, but you only pay customs duties when that product leaves the zone. So if you have a slow month and maybe you don't move as much product, you're not paying customs duty on that inventory that's just sitting and holding. So there is a cash flow incentive there. There's also the savings like we talked about with the inventory tax, getting duty out of that equation in order to keep the inventory tax dollars lower. So that's one spot. Anybody who manufactures, even if your items aren't very, maybe you spend a lot of 1%, 2%, some free, but the item that you're exporting is duty free, the item that you're making, have you ever gone through that process? Say, well, I import this stuff and I put something all together and I create something to sell to somebody. What is that item? How is it dutiable? Textile companies, there's a lot of them inside a foreign trade zone. Duty rates on textiles run anywhere from 16 to 32%. And, they do decorating a lot, and they have scrap and they have waste. And that's a very expensive problem to have if you import something and you've just spent 32% duty on it, and then you have to scrap it because the decoration on it's wrong. And so to me, that's where you really start to see the advantage. We do have some people who just simply do it. Excuse me. We do have some people who just simply do it in order to just defer what little duty they pay a little bit farther out. But I think for the most part, manufacturers are a great spot. Anybody who exports their items often is a great spot. Maybe you only have one distribution center. You import everything, let's say, into Kansas City, and then you sell that product globally. Well, there's no reason for you to pay customs duties on that product, let it sit here in Kansas City for 2 months, and then sell it to Canada, because you're either have just paid the duty and you're stuck, or we can try to file for duty drawback, which means you can only get 99% of that back, but then there's other service fees that go into that as well.
So on a global competitiveness, bringing an item in without duty paid, if you're selling to a global market, you can actually, that affects either the cost of the item, or it could be automatic margin to the bottom of the item. If you're selling an item, if you're talking about competitiveness on a global market for any type of good, really. If you're doing a lot of importations, then following up with exporting that product out.
And I guess kind of something along those lines is your own facility doesn't necessarily have to be the foreign trade zone. So there are zones, and that's what Scarborough is actually in the middle of setting up, is a zone where we could have multiple customers enter product into our zone. Now, we can't set up a manufacturing site inside of our warehouse, but for those of you who just want to store product, maybe some of you sell to some of the big automotive folks, and they already have foreign trade zones. Then you can take advantage of what's called a zone-to-zone transfer. You can import product in, put it in a foreign trade zone, whether it's your own private one or it's a public one, and then transfer that product to them and never pay customs duties. And like you just said, then it's either additional margin on that product, or it allows you to be that point or two more competitive that you weren't previously because you were paying that customs duty.